Hello and welcome to AEE 5204, Evaluation of Extension and Outreach Programs. My name is Tom Archibald and I'm an Assistant Professor and Extension Specialist here in our Department of Agricultural Leadership and Community Education, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you this semester as we explore program evaluation, especially in contexts of community non-formal extension and outreach programs. To start with, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been here in the department about 1 year. Before that, I was studying adult and extension education at Cornell University. Prior to that, I was a 4-H agent in 2 communities outside of Ithaca, New York, in upstate New York. And before that, I was a Peace Corps volunteer doing environmental education in Gabon. And one of your first assignments will actually be to introduce yourselves to your peers and to me using the forum feature on Scholar. So this prompt is up there already, so once you finish this presentation, at some point during this week, if you could, just go in there to the forum tab on Scholar and write your name and your area of work and or study, depending on whether you're focusing on studying something or working on something, what you hope to get out of this course, and hopefully I'll be able to meet your needs and meet your expectations. And then what prior experience, if any, do you have with program evaluation? I think one of the great things about this course is that we have all of your expertise and your experience to draw from your professional opportunities that you've been involved in, your experiences, and I really want to tap into that and use that to the advantage of your peers as we explore the practical ins and outs of program evaluation as it takes place in extension and outreach programs. So today what we're actually going to do is to begin by discussing a little bit an overview of the course, how the course is going to function, what will be expected of you, and we're also going to jump right into some of the introductory ideas and concepts and definitions around evaluation and focus on this idea of evaluative thinking, which will lead up to some practical activities that I'll have you do at some point during the week. And I think it's evaluative thinking in particular is a really good way to get started because it can help us really think through what evaluation is all about, why it matters, and how it might be able to help us in the community and extension programming that we do. So to start with, we're going to briefly go over the course objectives, which of course are on the syllabus, which is posted to the Scholar site and which also has been emailed around to you. We are going to begin the course, the first section, after this section on introductory definitions and evaluation basics, will be to really jump into the major epistemological and methodological branches of program evaluation. I think it's important to, by the time we get to the technical processes and the how-tos of actually how to do this stuff, to actually have some firm rooting in the theoretical underpinnings and the traditions of thought that have made evaluation what it is. I think it's very important to connect those two. So a lot of this course will be very practical, hands-on, and how-to, and at the same time it will be connected to particular theories and branches and traditions of evaluation. And hopefully by the end of the course you'll be able to connect to those theories based on your own experiences and your own work and articulate and justify your own philosophical positions and your own evaluation stances regarding why you choose one methodology or another methodology or one approach or another approach. And you'll also be very conversant and able to connect to ongoing directions, new directions, or emerging controversies in the field of evaluation so that you can really, even if it's not a major part of what you do, you can really have a well-rounded appreciation for the field of evaluation and how it connects to the work that you do every day. So now what I'd like to do is just provide a brief overview of the mechanics of this course, how the course is going to work. Now I've sent some of this information around in an email recently, and it's also posted to the announcement section on Scholar. But briefly, let's just go over the topics that we're going to cover in the course. Then we'll move on to talk about the readings and the assignments that you'll be expected to complete throughout the semester. So as far as topics, as you see in the syllabus, this course is divided up into 4 large sections. The topics really fall out into those sections. The first one, for the first couple of weeks, we'll be focusing again on these introduction to evaluation basics, some of the key terminology, some of the ideas around the profession of evaluation, the ethical standards and the competencies that are expected of evaluators. And then in part 2, we're going to move into discussing the major traditions of evaluation. So this will be where we touch on some more of the theory, some of the philosophical underpinnings of evaluation, and the major branches and traditions of thought that have really influenced evaluation and got us to where we are today. Then in the third part, we're going to really focus on the practical how-to aspects of evaluation, specifically how to plan, how to implement, and then how to support the utilization or the use of good, high-quality evaluation. And then finally, towards the end of the semester, we'll move into the fourth section, which really focuses on some of these emerging trends and some of the controversies in evaluation, which hopefully you'll find pertinent to your daily life as well as an educator out in the community. So as far as readings, this week, of course, there are no readings because we're just getting started. But by next week, there will be a series of readings which will be posted very shortly onto Scholar into the resources section. And for this coming week, there's just a series of online documents that I'm asking you to read, as well as 2 PDFs from 2 journal articles, which I think are a really good foundational way to get started in thinking through some of these fundamental concepts of evaluation. Then on a week-to-week basis, you will be receiving new readings. Very often it will actually be, the readings will be pulled from the Mertens and Wilson textbook, which I mentioned in a previous email will be the only required text for this course. So either you can purchase it on Amazon or another online source, or I just learned today actually that the textbook may be available as an ebook. So I'm not exactly sure of the source, but it might be more efficient or economical for you to get a hold of that textbook that way. But it will be required because we'll pretty much be going through the entire Mertens and Wilson book. It's a really good text that provides some really good nuanced approaches to thinking through both the practical and the theoretical side of program evaluation in communities. Then as far as assignments, there will be a series of assignments that you'll be expected to do on a week-to-week basis, and this is really designed to just keep you engaged, keep you on task. I know many of you are very busy with various other responsibilities in your jobs and in the community work that you do. But what we're going to plan on doing is every Wednesday morning by 8 a.m. I will post new material to the site. So sometimes it will be a PowerPoint like this, sometimes it might be some videos that I'm going to ask you to watch, sometimes there will be some worksheets and some hands-on activities, and whatever it might be, there will be clear instructions about what's expected of you, and then it will be up to you to work through that material throughout the week on your own pace, based on your own availability. But I would ask that you wrap up every week's work by Tuesday at around midnight, so that I have time to actually just check up on your work and ensure that you're getting everything done as we go through. So each week there will be some actual activities. Often this will be a worksheet or something that I ask you to actually produce, and then you will submit this. Now these are things that just might maybe take a few minutes to do, but it's just a way for me to ensure that you're getting some hands-on experience with the actual concepts that I'm presenting. And then every week there will be at least one prompt question put up into the forum section of Scholar. And one of the limitations of a course like this is that we don't get to sit around a table and share ideas. So hopefully by everyone contributing to the forum discussion section, then we can at least have a little bit more interaction amongst us as we work through some of these ideas. So again, more specific details for the activities and the forum discussions will be forthcoming, but they will be required for you to participate in each week in order to get full credit. Then also on an ongoing basis, starting with this coming week, with the readings that will be assigned for this week, you will be expected to write a brief response to the readings, what I'm calling a critical reading response. Now this is just roughly 2 pages, double-spaced, and I would like you to do, after you read the readings and you've thought about them a little bit, just try to synthesize some of the key ideas that you pulled from the readings, and definitely I want you to connect it to your own experiences as expert educators, to maybe pull in some examples or some experiences that you've had out in the field and try to connect it to the reading if possible. And then what I'll be asking is that you post your Word document in the Assignments tab on Scholar by Tuesday at midnight, so that we stay on task. And you will just be expected to do 10 critical reading responses over the course of the semester. So there's a couple weeks where if you're having a very busy week, you can let that slide and you won't be penalized for that. And then there are two more substantive assignments that we will be working through later in the semester. The first is a practicum report, and this is really a great opportunity for you to get some practical experience with engaging in some hands-on aspect of program evaluation. So there's more information on this assignment in the syllabus, and I'll be providing you a rubric and some more detailed expectations as the assignment draws near. But essentially, you'll be either working with an actual program out in the community, perhaps it's the one that you're already working with, a program you already work with in your job, or it could be a program that you worked with in the past and you're just drawing from those experiences and using those as you do this practicum report. But you'll either be creating an evaluation plan for a given extension or outreach program, or you will be collecting some data, whether it's focus group or survey or interview or what have you, for a given program. And then two other opportunities you'll have, or options for this activity, for this assignment, will be to actually come up with an evaluation system for a given organization. That is to say, sort of who should be collecting data with what frequency, how the data should be aggregated, how the system works as a whole. And then the fourth opportunity or option for this practicum report will be to come up with an evaluation capacity building approach. So as educators, it's interesting to think about how maybe as you gain some skills in evaluation, you could be called upon to try to share some of this knowledge and some of these skills with your peers. So evaluation capacity building is a way to pass that torch, to ripple out, and so you might choose to focus on evaluation capacity building, or ECB, as part of your practicum report. Then the fourth assignment will be more like a typical term paper. Now this will be a research brief, and I should mention that because there are all of these assignments, I don't want them to be very long and involved. Both the practicum report and the research brief should be just about 10 pages or so, double-spaced. So the research brief will be an opportunity for you to engage with the literature on evaluation, but in a particular area of your choosing. So maybe one of the emerging trends or the debates, the contemporary debates in evaluation might grab your attention, and you could do a literature review and a synthesis of that literature. Maybe there's a particular branch or a stream of evaluation thought, like utilization-focused evaluation or empowerment evaluation, and that really interests you, and so you want to delve into that a little bit more. You'll have the choice to choose a topic and then do a term paper, a research brief on that topic. The first two types of assignments, the activities and the critical reading responses, will be just graded on a check mark basis, so basically a check mark or a minus, and then the practicum report and the research brief will be traditional letter grades. But altogether, each one counts for 25% of your grade. So hopefully, if you're stronger in one area and you struggle a little bit in the other area, you'll still be able to succeed in this course. So now we're going to jump right into the content of the course and just have a brief presentation about what evaluation is, and it is a very many different things to many different people. And then we're going to wrap up by talking a little bit about evaluative thinking, which will lead into the two activities that I'm asking you to do for this week. So, myself as a professional evaluator, I deal with this really difficult issue of, if someone says they're a doctor or they're a lawyer, people generally know what they're talking about. But when I say I'm an evaluator, or maybe if you say you're an evaluator, people don't really know what you're talking about necessarily. So much so that there's actually an evaluator named Roger Miranda who wrote a children's book called Eva the Evaluator, which is great for use with children, but actually a very prominent evaluator named Michael Quinn Patton he gives copies of this book out to people from nonprofits or community organizations when he's working with them, just because it helps them understand what is this thing that we call evaluation. Now, one really interesting thing about evaluation that I did not realize when I was an extension agent, and I did not even realize until I was partway through graduate school, was that evaluation is a really viable career. More and more, when more programs and organizations are requiring evaluation, people who have knowledge and skills in program evaluation are really marketable. So, for instance, just back in 2009, 1 year after the financial crisis started, CNN.com and CareerBuilder ranked program evaluator as one of the 10 little-known fields with great job opportunities. And the American Evaluation Association has shown that even beyond the salary numbers that were associated with that CNN poll, there's a great distribution of opportunities across the evaluation field, whether you're a consultant or in administration or in a university setting or working in training. And at the time that I prepared this presentation, there were actually 136 different job postings on this job search page of the American Evaluation Association, which is the major professional association for evaluation. And so these are opportunities all across the country, some connected to cooperative extension, some connected to other community nonprofits, some connected to universities. It's really quite fascinating that there are so many jobs out there, and when you have evaluation skills, you become definitely more marketable and more competitive in this very difficult job market. Now, that's all good and well, but what is evaluation? Well, in a nutshell, you could think of it as applied inquiry. So, researchers use inquiry to learn about the world, to create new knowledge, but one thing that researchers generally can't do is tell you how valuable a program is or tell you if a program is working. But an evaluator can. So it's applied inquiry, using evidence and inquiry and evaluative thinking in an applied way to make judgments about programs and to try to make the world a better place. And probably, if you signed up for this course, evaluation connects in some way with what you do already, or you see a way in which you could use evaluation more in your current job or in your future career path. So it's quite clear that evaluation has a role in extension and outreach education, but in very related fields such as community development, the foundation or nonprofit world, international development work, agriculture, higher education, health and related industries, pre-K-12 education, business and industry, often they do this even better than we do in the nonprofit world, consulting, most evaluators are actually independent consultants who work on a project-to-project basis, just helping folks out with the different work that they're doing. The government is a very large funder of evaluation, and there's a number of government employees who their entire careers have been focused on trying to evaluate government programs and make them work better. So for this course, we'll of course be focusing on extension and outreach education, but I hope you see that everything we're going to be talking about is pertinent across this whole range of professional activities, and my real hope is that you find a way to apply some of this knowledge and to have this knowledge and these skills be relevant to what you do in your work. So what is evaluation? You probably all have a basic idea of it, but what we're going to do is just go through some of the classic definitions of this thing and think through how these definitions are similar, but also how they differ in some ways. So Carol Weiss, who is one of the founding mothers of evaluation, who just passed away recently, unfortunately, she wrote a book called Evaluation, and here she offers this definition. Evaluation is the systematic assessment of the operation and or the outcomes of a program or policy compared to a set of explicit or implicit standards as a means of contributing to the improvement of the program or policy. So there's a few interesting things about this definition. One is she's very clear that evaluation is about operation or processes as well as outcomes. So it's not just outcomes, it's also how these programs or policies are implemented. And then another interesting aspect of this definition has to do with the notion of comparison. Evaluation, according to Carol Weiss, is inevitably involved in comparing either to some explicit and clear set of criteria or some implicit standards. If you do an evaluation and you say, my program worked, or my program was good, what exactly do you mean by that? Good in relation to what? And then she rounds out her definition by emphasizing this one purpose, which is program improvement, continuous program improvement. Michael Scriven, who is another founder of the field of evaluation, perhaps you've heard of the terms formative evaluation and summative evaluation, which we'll be presenting next week in more detail. But in any case, it was Michael Scriven who first coined those terms. So he's been around for a very long time. He's an excellent methodologist and really the founder of the modern field of evaluation. So his definition is cited quite often, and he says evaluation is the process of determining the merit, worth, and value of things, and that evaluations are the products of that process. So here it's really interesting to think about how evaluation is both a process and a product. And he is also very much involved in that comparison aspect of evaluation. If you're judging the merit or the worth or the value of things, again, thinking of the difference between research and evaluation, you're inevitably comparing the program to some standard, whether it's implicit or explicit, and deciding if it's good or not, or where it could be improved, or where it's doing really well. And Michael Quinn Patton, who I've already mentioned, he's another very influential evaluator, and I really like this definition. It's quite holistic and well-rounded. He says evaluation is the systematic collection of information about the activities, characteristics, and outcomes of programs in order to make judgments about the program, improve the program, and or inform decisions about future programming. So here he's getting at outcomes and processes. It's something that's systematic, and it's about program improvement and a number of other purposes, such as future program planning. So we'll be drawing from a lot of Michael Patton's work over this course. Here are 3 of his books which were very influential: Utilization-Focused Evaluation, a book on qualitative methods, and then this relatively new concept of developmental evaluation, which we'll be exploring a little bit later on in this course. Now, this is a definition that some colleagues of mine have come up with, and I really like it because I think of it as a touchstone statement that, especially when we get into part 3, the really how-to, the nuts and bolts of program evaluation, this will give us an opportunity to always reflect back on this statement and see to what extent the decisions we're making about data collection, about creating a logic model, about analyzing survey data, to what extent those decisions tie back to this definition. And really, the 4 words there that are underlined, those are the words I want you to focus in on. Evaluation is all about systematic inquiry to get information that is accurate and useful and credible in a way that's feasible. And here what's really important is, credible is followed by 2 relevant stakeholders. So something that is accurate to me, according to my assumptions and my perceptions, might not be accurate to a young person involved in a 4-H program, or a farmer who's coming to your field days that you're offering. Something that's useful to you might not be useful to your boss or to your funder. So for each of these, what is accurate, what is useful, what is feasible, and what is credible, there is no easy answer as to what we mean by this. It depends. It's very contextually specific. But that's why thinking through the stakeholders in any evaluation is so important. And then we round out this definition by talking about the use or the purpose of an evaluation. So it can be to contribute to general knowledge, to kind of learning, but also it should set you up to have a cyclical process of evaluation. Very often we think, okay, our program is coming to an end, now we have to do an evaluation. But really, evaluation should be more of a cyclical, ongoing process, where any data you collect today, any analyses you do tomorrow, these should be setting you up for next year's evaluation, so that little by little you can be building the evidence base about your program. And then finally, we talk here about program evolution. So programs are not static. They evolve, they develop over time, and good evaluation that is well matched to your program should actually help your program improve over time and keep developing and evolving. So I've already mentioned this notion of the cycle of evaluation, and here I just want to emphasize the fact that evaluation is not a one-off event that just happens at one moment in the life of a program. It actually involves an ongoing cycle of evaluation planning, evaluation implementation, and evaluation utilization. So the so what question. If you do a really great evaluation of your program and then you write this really nice report, turn it into a PDF, print it out, and drop it in some drawer or put it on a dusty shelf, what was the purpose of that? What purpose does it serve? So we're going to actually focus a lot on utilization-focused evaluation, where everything you do when you're planning an evaluation and planning a program is really focused on getting some usefulness out of that data, out of those insights, out of that evaluation. And we'll also emphasize quite a bit the planning phase, because this notion really holds true in a lot of things, probably in program planning and in education, but also in evaluation. If you think through carefully at the outset of a program what it is you intend to evaluate, and you gather all the necessary data, you have all the tools in place, it's going to be a lot easier come the end of the program, and you'll end up with much more accurate, credible, useful data in a way that's feasible to you. So there are a number of reasons why we might evaluate, and just to lighten the mood and try to keep this from being too boring, I have a series of cartoons actually that introduce a number of different reasons why you might do evaluation. But first, the sort of summary statement is here. Evaluation serves a number of purposes, specifically for accountability, for adaptive management and program improvement, for learning and general creation of new knowledge, and at the end of the day, evaluation should, in my opinion, always serve social betterment, making people's lives better. The educational initiatives that you're involved with, I imagine, are working to make the world a better place. And program evaluation can be a really powerful tool to help you do that work in better ways, in more strategic ways, to use the resources you have to try to achieve the goals that you have. So now to the cartoons. Very simply put, you can do evaluation just to know if your program is working. You can do evaluation because you know that you could do better, but you don't know exactly how to get there. Evaluation can offer you an opportunity to systematically think through how you can improve that program, how you can improve your practice. And this one's really about the accountability notion. Oftentimes we do evaluation because you have to. Someone's making you. Maybe in order to keep getting funding, you have to do it. Or because your boss says you have to. So sure, in that case you're going to do it. Similarly, these days, money is short, time is short. Time is probably the most limiting resource. So if you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of staff or volunteers, you want to be doing activities and projects and programs that work really well. So in order to know what works really well, maybe evaluation could be a useful tool. Now this one was really thought-provoking when I came across it. Perhaps you've been working day after day for some goal or some outcomes, but because you're not doing evaluation, you can actually never know when you achieve your goals. Wouldn't it be nice to go home from work one day and say, yes, I know I actually achieved what I set out to do, and sure, there's more work to do tomorrow, but I can rest easy tonight knowing that based on my evaluation, I've shown that I've really met some of my targets, I've reached some of my goals, and I can move forward from there. Now, without advocating anyone beating anyone up, this just goes to show that at some times in evaluation, you have to make value judgments and say which program is better, which opportunity is stronger, which option is the best in this case. And evaluation can help give you the information you need to see some of those, make some of those decisions as well. Now, for those of you who work with VCE, Virginia Cooperative Extension, one reason you might want to do evaluation is because it's part of the DCE programming model. And here, I like to say that it's actually at the base of the programming model. There it is at the bottom, program evaluation and reporting. And it's also important to note, of course, that working with stakeholders is at the middle, because stakeholders are very influential in evaluation, as well as everything else that we do in Virginia Cooperative Extension. So perhaps this is just another reason why you might consider doing more program evaluation. Now, lastly, maybe the reason why to do evaluation is because you are a naturally reflective practitioner. You are a natural evaluative thinker. You know, you might be driving home from a program, or cleaning up after a program, driving home from camp, or whatever it is you do, and you're inevitably reflecting on the program. You're thinking through what went well, what didn't go so well. And so what you're actually doing is, even though it's not a formal evaluation, you are practicing evaluative thinking. And today I'm going to introduce this idea in a little bit more detail, and then present to you some activities which will be posted to Scholar to let you engage in a hands-on fashion with this notion of evaluative thinking. And really, my purpose for introducing evaluative thinking is, you know, even though you signed up for this course, you might, your major experience with evaluation might be that you do it because someone told you to, or for these accountability or monitoring or bean counting purposes. However, what I'm hoping you'll get through this course is to realize that evaluation is not just about bean counting or counting numbers up and sending the data off and never really knowing what happens to it. Evaluation should be about being critically reflective in your work. And hopefully I can offer some tools and some perspectives that you can actually put into practice to help augment and support your ongoing evaluative thinking that you're doing already. So what do I mean when I say evaluation is a way of thinking? Here, this cartoon just offers up this image of a very stark border between program territory and evaluation land. Often, when we think of evaluation, all people are wanting is findings, right? However, what I'm proposing to you today is that evaluation is not just about findings, but it's a way of thinking that can infuse everything that you do in your professional practice. So evaluative thinking, Michael Quinn Patton again, I told you we'd be drawing from his work a lot. He had this excellent quote in this recent case study report done on, it was actually a case study done on 4 different international non-governmental organizations working in Africa and Latin America with poverty alleviation and other initiatives like that. So he says, evaluation is an activity, but evaluative thinking is a way of doing business. And once that way of business takes hold, then evaluation tends to be more useful and more used, actually. It actually serves some purpose if the organizational culture can manifest evaluative thinking. So that's one of my big goals. It's to have, if I work with an organization, or maybe when you take this course and you go back and you work with your organization, it's to have your culture, the culture of your organization, little by little, become more like a culture of evaluative thinking. So what do I mean by this concept? Here's just one definition that some friends of mine and I have developed, and there's just the words in bold are really what I want you to focus on. Essentially, what we're talking about is critical thinking, okay? Something that you do anyway, but now we're thinking of critical thinking in the context of evaluation. And this has to do with an attitude of inquisitiveness, a belief in the value of evidence. So instead of just trusting your gut, you say, what evidence might we need in order to know if we're really right in our thinking? How do we know what we know? It has to do also with a belief in the value of evidence, identifying assumptions, posing thoughtful questions, pursuing deeper understanding through reflection and taking on multiple perspectives, and then perhaps most importantly, getting ready to take action. So when I say evaluative thinking, by no means do I mean thinking just for thinking's sake. No. This is about getting ready for informed action. So just a few more quotes to round out what I mean by evaluative thinking. Like I mentioned before, it has to do with doing reality testing, asking, how do we know what we think we know? How might we be wrong? And it's really important to see that this is not just for the evaluation specialist or the evaluation expert in your organization or it's not just for some external consultant who might come in and work with your school or your agency or your nonprofit, wherever it is that you work. This is for everybody to do, and not just about end of project type of stuff, but it should be a way of thinking that infuses and informs everything that goes on in your organization. It has to do with focusing on results, being reflective, asking questions, especially testing assumptions. That's what the activities today will focus on, testing assumptions. It's reflecting, learning, modifying, a constant state of mind within all of an organization's systems, whether it has to do with financial management, personnel management, management of logistics and transportation. All of that you could actually apply evaluative thinking. So hopefully you're seeing that the bounds of evaluation, when you conceive of it as evaluative thinking, are actually much broader than just end of program evaluation. Again, it's a type of reflective practice that is shot throughout all of an organization's work practices. So, as we turn to this week's activities, I just want to briefly go over some concepts that have to do with assumptions. Of course, we all know what assumptions are, but we never really stop to think about what we mean when we talk about assumptions, and how assumptions might play a really integral role in the extension and outreach programs that we work with. So, an assumption is, of course, an idea, a thought, or belief that is taken for granted. So you don't necessarily have any evidence for an assumption. If you have evidence, then it might be a fact or some other type of knowledge. But if you're just going on your gut feeling, it's an assumption. Now, some assumptions are explicit. They're written out, and oftentimes this can actually be written out in a program document or a plan of work. But it's important to realize that there are also a lot of implicit assumptions that are unspoken. Now, specifically, I want to present just 3 different types of assumptions, and the reason why I want to do this is because as we go throughout the semester, I always want you to be able to come back not just to that touchstone statement about what is credible, accurate, useful, and feasible, but also to come back to evaluative thinking and be able to question the assumptions in everything that you do, even if it's applied to evaluation itself. Say you're choosing a survey, or choosing a focus group approach, or coming up with one particular evaluation question, or working with a logic model in one particular way. Everything you do, even in evaluation, is founded on assumptions. So it's very important to get clear, to uncover these buried assumptions, to think through what evidence we might need to turn these assumptions into fact, and also to think through what possible alternative interpretations might be explaining what's actually going on with these assumptions. Now, I need to pause here just to say that assumptions are not bad by any means. There are some dangerous or critical assumptions, but also we could not function unless we made assumptions about how the world functions. We have assumptions about how this course is going to work. You assume that if you do the work, you'll get a good grade. You assume that I'll post modules by Wednesday morning at 8 because I said I would. All of these assumptions are healthy, good, natural assumptions, but at the same time, they are assumptions, and sometimes we just have to think them through clearly. So these 3 types of assumptions, the first, and all 3 of these are very important to program evaluation. The first is what we call causal assumptions, and really what it is, it's about relationships of how different parts of the world work together. So you're not necessarily saying that thing A caused outcome X, or activity A caused outcome X, but what you are saying is, what is the relationship between program activities or program outputs and the intended outcomes? So for instance, if we do X, then Y will result. If we do a science, technology, engineering, and math program, then youth interest in science will increase. Unless you have any evidence for that, that is fundamentally an assumption, and that would be classed as a causal assumption. Then the second group of assumptions we refer to as prescriptive, and this really has to do with an assumption that is basically saying what should happen or what ought to happen. So for example, I do some work in international development as well, and in many development contexts, there's this assumption that anything you do in agriculture, in nutrition, in no matter what the program is, there has to be a gender component. And probably this is an assumption that holds true, because for so long, in many of these programs, perhaps men have been benefiting more than women, or it's been disrupting some family structures or something like that. So you can't do a development project or a development program without thinking about gender. Yet all the same, it's important to realize that this statement that all programs must have a gender component, this is actually a prescriptive assumption, because you're saying what should happen, or what ought to happen, or what must happen. And if you think about any program that you're involved in, there's an underlying prescriptive assumption that the community in which you work, that they need this. So if you work in a school and you're approaching education in one particular way, you're doing that, whether you're aware of it or not, because there's this underlying prescriptive assumption that the students need this knowledge or need this behavior change. That goes the same, it's exactly the same in community education, in extension programs. Every program that exists is founded on an underlying prescriptive assumption about what that community needs or what these people need. And then the third type of assumption is probably the most difficult to work with, and we refer to these as paradigmatic assumptions. These are the deeply held foundational beliefs about how the world works, and they're very generally implicit or tacit. They're unspoken. They're not usually out in the open. And one example that I came up with is this idea, for instance, of the idea that scientific knowledge is fundamentally better than indigenous or local knowledge. So this is an overarching theory or a worldview about how knowledge works in the world, and you could argue that it's right or wrong, but at the end of the day, we don't necessarily have evidence, per se, to back up this assumption. And it's paradigmatic because it's really fundamental. It's really at the foundational levels of how we work in the world, how we exist in the world. So these activities will be posted into the assignment section on Scholar, but I'll just walk you through them really quickly just to augment the instructions. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, on the Word document that will be posted in the assignments, there'll be a replication of this blue table here. And what I want you to do is to brainstorm some assumptions that people commonly make. Number one, in everyday life. Number two, in the media. So if you could, maybe pull up a website with your favorite news site, or pick up the newspaper or turn on the radio and hear some assumptions that are going on in the media. And then in the third one is program or project implementation. So for this row, you could think of an actual program that you're involved in, or you have been involved in the past. And again, skipping back if you need to those definitions about what we mean by causal, prescriptive, and paradigmatic assumptions, then I'd like you to try to come up with at least one example in each cell of the table. So one causal assumption that is from your everyday life. So an example might be when the crosswalk light turns, that might be more of a prescriptive assumption, but when the crosswalk light turns to the little white guy who's the walk signal, then that means that I should then cross the street. Now, that is a pretty important assumption, because it's an if-then statement. If the light turns to the little white walking guy, then I should cross the street. Now, maybe someone won't see the light, maybe, who knows? You got to question that assumption so that you don't get hit by a car. Also, the boundaries between what is causal, what is prescriptive, what is paradigmatic, it's a little fuzzy. So don't get too caught up in trying to get it in the right place, but try to think through these causal assumptions, the prescriptive assumptions about what should happen, and then the paradigmatic ones, the more underlying foundational beliefs. Then the second activity, the second part of the activity, is going to be this activity called scenario analysis. So in the assignments tab, there will be a one-page handout posted, and it will be a story about this woman named Tracy, who goes abroad to do a needs assessment for a community education, community development program, and she's operating on a number of assumptions in the story. And your job is going to be to respond to these 3 questions. So on a separate Word document, I'm going to ask you to respond to numbers 1, 2, and 3 here. What assumptions, both explicit and implicit, do you think that Tracy is operating under? List as many of these as you can. You don't have to say which are explicit and which are implicit. Just get down as many assumptions as you can when you see what Tracy's doing. And of those assumptions that you've listed, which ones could Tracy check by using simple inquiry to get just a little bit more evidence? And how could she do this? How could she garner some more evidence or gather some more evidence in order to check the assumptions that she's working under? And then the third task, and this is probably the most difficult one, is for you to come up with 1 or 2 plausible alternative interpretations of the scenario that could be true and that are consistent with the facts or the events that are described in the scenario, but that you think that Tracy would say, no, that's not what's going on, that's not it. So for instance, in the story, just to give you an example, Tracy goes to the meeting and she's supposed to meet this guy named Esteban, but Esteban is late. So you would say, you see in the story that Tracy starts getting flustered and upset. So the one assumption that you would come up with is like this. Tracy assumes that because Esteban was late to the meeting, that he somehow disrespects her or doesn't think that the meeting about the local needs is important. So in number 2, for that assumption, the simple inquiry or the evaluative thinking is really quite simple. She could say, Esteban, I'm new to this country, I'm not really aware of how things work, but I noticed you were late to the meeting, and I was just wondering, just out of curiosity, could you tell me, why you were late, and maybe what we could do to meet on time next time? And then we don't know exactly what Esteban would say, but in number 3, you can think through maybe what might be going on. So there are a number of alternative interpretations. So Tracy is really focused on this assumption that Esteban has lacked respect or doesn't take this meeting seriously. But maybe his kid is sick and he's in the hospital. Maybe his car broke down, but he was too ashamed to say it because Tracy's a foreigner coming into his community, so he just let it go. There are a lot of things that could be going on. And the purpose of this activity, this is a way to practice evaluative thinking, is throughout the semester, in everything you do with evaluation, the goal is going to be to question assumptions, to think critically, and to think what evidence we need. Not necessarily a big fancy evaluation, but what simple inquiry could you do on your program, your extension or outreach program, in order to test which alternative interpretations might be actually happening. And when you do that, my hope is that it can help you tap into your natural tendency to be an evaluative thinker. You can use some new tools and approaches, and at the end of the day, hopefully this can help you do your job better and make your life better as well. I know they're lofty goals, but these are the goals I have.